Ever scroll through your newsfeed and wonder, like, who's really controlling what I see? Today's deep dive tackles that question head-on.
Yeah.
Through the lens of two names you might not expect, Robert Maxwell and Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, forget Musk and Bezos for a second.
Right.
These guys were the original media titans battling for power back when newspapers were the way to shape public opinion.
Back in the day.
And get this,
Okay.
their story involves accusations of spying,
What?
Cold War intrigue. It's crazier than any Succession episode.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We've got articles and research, even some Wikipedia deep cuts. And what we want to understand is this. Did their rivalry actually undermine the very democracy they profited from?
Because here's the thing, this isn't just ancient history.
Right.
The tactics Maxwell and Murdoch used their battles for influence, it's like they wrote the playbook for the information wars we're seeing play out today, just on a global scale.
Right. So to understand where we are now, we need to rewind back to the beginning. It seems like things really kicked off with a struggle for control of the news of the world.
Absolutely. And it was about more than just business.
Oh.
Imagine you're the owner of a newspaper considered as British as roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
Wow.
Suddenly you've got Robert Maxwell, a Czechoslovakian immigrant with alleged socialist ties, trying to buy you out.
Talk about a culture clash.
Yeah.
It's easy to see why the Carr family, who owned the paper, were a tad apprehensive.
Yeah.
But Maxwell was already a successful publisher.
Right.
Why was this particular newspaper such a big deal?
At the time, the News of the World wasn't just any newspaper. It was a cornerstone of British culture with the power to influence millions.
Wow.
The thought of Maxwell controlling that narrative, it
Yeah.
sent shockwaves through the establishment.
Really?
In fact, the paper's editor even wrote an op-ed opposing the bid, outright invoking Maxwell's foreign roots.
Wow.
It was brutal.
Wow, talk about a public takedown.
Yeah.
So how did Murdoch even get involved? Was he already a player in this world?
He was building his empire, but his bid for the News of the World showed he was playing 4D chess while everyone else was still on checkers.
Oh.
He understood that this wasn't just about money, it was about political maneuvering.
Right.
Murdoch secured the backing of the unions, promising fewer job losses than Maxwell, and ultimately that's what tipped the scales.
And that's how it started, with Murdoch using his understanding of the political chessboard to outmaneuver Maxwell and gain a major foothold in British media.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it didn't stop there.
Oh, no.
The very next year, Maxwell tried to buy the Sun newspaper, only to be thwarted again by Murdoch, who once again leveraged his political savvy to come out on top.
Wow, he's good.
These early victories were crucial for Murdoch. They showed he understood the true currency of the media game influence.
But they're already going head-to-head.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we've got this intense rivalry brewing, but it gets even wilder when you factor in the Cold War paranoia of the time.
Yeah.
There are all these whispers about Maxwell's alleged ties to the Soviet Union.
And this is where things get really interesting, because
Okay.
these weren't just rumors.
Yeah.
There's documented evidence of his publishing house Pergamon Press
Okay.
having deep ties to the Soviet scientific community.
Hmm.
And remember, this was during the height of the Cold War, when the transfer of scientific knowledge was practically espionage.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that in the middle of this media war, one of the key players might have been entangled with a Cold War adversary.
That's right. And while the exact nature of his relationship with the Soviets is still debated, even the possibility adds a whole other layer of intrigue to his rivalry with Murdoch. It's like something out of a spy novel, right? But it gets even more complicated because while Maxwell is navigating this world of potential espionage, he's also trying to outmaneuver Murdoch in the cutthroat world of British media.
So they're both building these massive media empires, but they're also playing on a whole different chessboard with global stakes.
Right.
No wonder their tactics became so ruthless.
Exactly. As their rivalry intensified, they seemed to adopt a win-at-all-costs mentality.
Oh, wow. Using their newspapers as weapons to target rivals and influence political outcomes.
We see echoes of that today with how some people use social media, right?
Totally.
Spreading misinformation, trying to manipulate public opinion.
It's a very apt comparison.
Yeah.
But imagine that instead of tweets and Facebook posts, you've got these powerful newspapers shaping the narrative for millions of readers every day.
Yeah.
Back then, newspapers were the primary source of information for most people, so the potential for manipulation was even greater.
It's almost like they understood something that we're just grappling with now.
Yeah.
The information is power.
And they weren't afraid to wield that power.
Right.
Take Maxwell and the Daily Mirror, for example.
Okay.
When he acquired the paper in 1984, he proclaimed that his editors would have freedom to produce the news without interference. Sounds great on the surface, right?
Sure. Who wouldn't want a free and independent press?
Except knowing Maxwell, we can guess that freedom came with some pretty hefty strings attached.
There are countless accounts of him directly interfering with editorial decisions, even dictating how stories should be slanted to align with his own views.
Okay, that's not exactly a free press, is it?
No.
So much for journalistic integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember, this is the same man who was potentially entangled with Soviet intelligence.
Right.
It raises some very unsettling questions about who was really shaping the narratives being presented to the British public.
It's a chilling thought. It makes you wonder if their ambition and drive for power ultimately undermined the very ideals of democracy that they were supposedly promoting through their newspapers.
It's a question that continues to be debated by scholars and historians. How do you reconcile the idea of a free press with the reality of media ownership concentrated in the hands of a few powerful individuals? Something we're still grappling with today.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about Maxwell and his tactics. What about Murdoch? Was he any different?
Murdoch was perhaps more subtle in his approach, but no less ambitious or ruthless. He, too, used his newspapers to promote his own interests and attack his rivals.
Right.
The difference was Murdoch had a knack for adapting to the changing media landscape. He saw the way the winds were blowing, and he wasn't afraid to adjust his sails.
What do you mean? Give me an example.
Well, take his transformation of the Sun into a tabloid powerhouse.
Okay.
As the market for sensationalism grew, Murdoch leaned into it, embracing a more populist, often controversial style of journalism. This move, while profitable, had a profound impact on the British media landscape.
You're talking about the rise of tabloid culture,
Yeah.
celebrity gossip scandals, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And while some argue it lowered the bar for journalistic standards, prioritizing entertainment over in-depth reporting, there's no denying that it resonated with a wider audience.
So while Maxwell was trying to control the political narrative, Murdoch was tapping into a different kind of influence, the power of popular culture.
And that's a key difference between the two men. Maxwell seemed driven by ideology, by a desire to shape the political landscape. Murdoch, while certainly not apolitical, was more pragmatic.
Okay.
He understood the power of entertainment, of giving people what they wanted, even if it wasn't always what they needed.
That makes him a bit more complex, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, was he deliberately trying to undermine democracy, or was he just playing the game everyone else was playing just better?
It's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's not a matter of simple intentions, but rather the consequences of their actions. Regardless of their motivations, both Maxwell and Murdoch, through their rivalry and their pursuit of power, changed the face of journalism.
And those changes are still felt today, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can draw a line from their tactics to the way information is weaponized in the digital age.
Absolutely. In fact, one could argue that Murdoch's early embrace of new technology foreshadowed the digital disruption that would come to define the media landscape in the 21st century.
It's wild to think about how Murdoch's early moves, like bringing in electronic typesetting at the Times, were already hinting at the technological revolution that was about to upend the entire media industry.
It was a huge gamble at the time, especially alienating the print unions after he'd relied on their support before.
Yeah, it's almost like he knew he needed them to get his foot in the door,
Right.
but then was immediately turning on them to get ahead.
It's ruthless.
Yeah.
But he was playing the long game, wasn't he? Understanding that technology was going to be the key to reaching more people, spreading his influence further.
And that brings us back to a question we've been circling around this whole time. What happens when so much media power is concentrated in the hands of a few?
Right.
Whether it's Murdoch's tabloids or Maxwell's alleged manipulation of the Daily Mirror, it makes you think about how those actions impact democracy itself.
It's a huge question, right? Because if a few people control the information that everyone else sees,
Right.
can we really say that we have a truly free and independent press? I mean, that's one of the cornerstones of a functioning democracy.
Right, because it's not just about who owns the printing presses anymore. It's about who controls the narrative, the information people see.
Exactly. And that control becomes even more concerning when you factor in the suspicions surrounding Maxwell and his potential ties to foreign intelligence. If true, it paints a dark picture of how media empires could be used for purposes beyond simply informing the public.
Yeah, almost like their own personal propaganda machines.
Right.
Wow.
It's a scary thought.
It's like something out of a spy thriller, except the stakes are very real.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these larger-than-life figures. Cold War intrigue, accusations of espionage, and this constant battle for the hearts and minds of the public. It feels like we've gone way beyond just a simple business rivalry.
Because it was never just about business, was it? It was about ideology, about power, and about control. And their legacies continue to loom large over the media landscape even today.
You know, it's ironic. We started this deep dive talking about how Maxwell and Murdoch's names aren't as recognizable as the Zuckerbergs and Musks of the world today.
Yeah.
But in so many ways, their story feels incredibly relevant.
Absolutely. They were the precursors to the tech giants we see dominating the media landscape now. The scale might be different, but the fundamental questions are the same. How do we ensure a free and independent press in an age of increasingly consolidated media ownership? How do we navigate the flood of information and misinformation in the digital age? And how do we hold those in power accountable when the lines between media politics and technology are becoming increasingly blurred?
Those are some heavy questions, and unfortunately, we don't have all the answers. But it feels like understanding this history, the rivalry between Maxwell and Murdoch, gives us a framework for understanding the forces that are still shaping our world today.
Exactly. By understanding how these power dynamics played out in the past, we can better equip ourselves to navigate the complexities of the present. And that's what's so fascinating about this deep dive.
It's not just about two media moguls battling for dominance. It's about the bigger picture, the lasting impact their rivalry has had on how we consume information, how we participate in democracy, and how we understand the world around us.
It really makes you think.
It does.
Yeah.
So the next time you open a news app or scroll through your feed, ask yourself, who's shaping the story I'm being told? What voices am I not hearing? And what can I do to become a more critical and informed citizen?
Those are questions we should all be asking ourselves.
Absolutely. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating and often unsettling world of media power and influence. Until next time, stay curious.